Well, I was born and raised in Jersey City, in the Greenville section on Seaview Avenue. I had three brothers, Mark, Jimmy, and Tommy. All three of them came to the police department, ultimately. My dad was on the police department, he was a captain. I have to say that I find it funny sometimes because people will say, oh, their dad got them a job, this or that. And it's a civil service department, so it doesn't happen that way. It's not, it's not like anybody influences who gets a job. I went to St. Paul's School, which at that point was a Catholic school, which was a big thing in Jersey City back in the 70s, for grammar school. I think it's not even, I think it's a charter school now, or was several years back. Then I went to St. Anthony's High School. Then, I worked a couple of odd jobs and I became a police officer. I'll say this. It's interesting because when I got out of the police academy, I was assigned to the South District, which it was good. It was a busy precinct, and as time went on, and I was working in the radio cars and things. I had asked my dad. I said, could you maybe help me out, get me into a plainclothes unit, something like that? And he looked at me and he laughed, and he said, you know what? You need to make your way yourself on this job, and it's probably the best thing that he had done for me, because that's what I did. He would never do anything for us in terms of interfering with getting us into different squads, things like that. What's kind of interesting is that, use of force. A lot of, like, I'll see something in New York, and I don't know all the facts. I'll see something like a police officer. They'll start from the use of force. A poor guy selling cigarettes, Lucy cigarettes, on the street corner was choked by the cops. And it doesn't really go down like that. We can start that he was selling cigarettes, and then we have to remember that there's a person that's complaining about them, a vendor somewhere, and the person may be emotionally disturbed or whatever it is, and the police officers get involved. And in proper incidents, it's not the police officers who escalate the use of force. It's the bad guy. It's the guy that they're confronting, whether he has some type of mental health issue or he's just a violent individual. So in terms of use of force, very often what may seem like a minor incident, and somebody comes in and they call it in the police department opened up, like maybe stitches or something, like gets injured. It what may be at first blush a minor incident, it's escalated by the person that doesn't want to get a summons or doesn't want to go to jail. Yeah, it was, with respect to that incident, it was an October night. I remember the date because it was such an important event in my life. It's October 4th, I think it was 1980, and myself and the partner I was working with at that night, we stopped the car, minor violation, and Marvin Oliver got out of the car. He had a girlfriend in there. I'm not going to name her. It's not important. And he started acting up, just like, what are you stopping me for? This is why we stopped you. But he kept acting up because we were asking him for, let's see a license, registration, insurance. He didn't have the proper paperwork, and that's a lot of times that's why somebody might start acting up and getting a little bit aggressive. So he was given time to look for the proper paperwork to the car. At the time, it was an insurance card, which you were okay to impound the vehicle with. Now it's been changed subsequent to the 1980s. Now you have to give an opportunity to go into the police station in order to the next day, within 24 hours, with a proof of insurance, or your car can then be impounded. They just make it hard to impound it, which is fine. But at the time, it was okay to impound the car. I asked him for the keys to the car. He stand up. He was a tall guy, tall fella, and he held the keys up over his head. I tried taking them, almost wrestling, till the keys dropped, and then him and I are now on the ground. I fell to the ground, and my partner hit him in the leg with a nightstick, like you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to hit him in the head if you can avoid it. Obviously, that could also be a proper use of force under certain circumstances, but he hit him in the leg. He got a couple of stitches in his leg, but he stopped resisting. He was handcuffed and he was arrested. And I was indicted. Several years later, I believe, there was a whole brouhaha. Glenn Cunningham at the time I believe was a council president or a councilman, and Glenn wanted a civilian review board. So we had the union down there. We were protesting the making up of a civilian review board. So I was subsequently indicted by Hudson County Grand Jury. I went to trial, which was probably one of the scariest times on the job. Actually going on trial where you could lose your job, go to jail. And probably one of the most interesting things during that trial was Marvin Oliver had testified that I had a nightstick and I was choking him with the nightstick against the car. And then he said that I dropped the nightstick. And then my lawyer, Lenny Myers, and I love the guy, he was a great attorney. He says, well, after the officer dropped the nightstick, what did you do? He said, well, I leaned down, I picked it up, and I gave it back to him. My attorney said, what? You gave it back to him so he could choke you again? He says, my parents always taught me how to turn the other cheek. So ultimately I was acquitted, and then I, kept on with my career in the patrol division of the Jersey City Police Department.
So looking back, would you say that you felt that the indictment and that whole process was political?
Yes, 100%.
Cops are always saying, whenever a cop is indicted, whenever a cop is charged, it's politics.
I get it. I know what you're saying, but I think the extent of the injury, being, a couple of stitches on a leg, I don't think it's consistent with an indictment. I mean, there's much more violent uses of forces, that I thought it was political. I thought it was political because Glenn Cunningham, who I grown to like, and I worked with him, afterwards, when he came back to the department as a lieutenant and then as a captain. But I think it was political on his part, and I think there was probably some undue influence. You know what? Bottom line is, I went to trial, I was acquitted, and I was permitted to go on, with the rest of my career. And again, as you said, I became the chief of police. I actually wrote something on that because Fuller went out and he suspended them. I believe now. I don't think Phil Zaki was a chief any longer. I think he was retired. I think it was the beginning of June, right, 2017. I think he had just retired, and I don't know who signed the suspension order, but I would have never signed a suspension order, okay, because they didn't have the due process that's afforded under the Attorney General guidelines, okay. And one of the things that you can't suspend somebody because you think they might have done something, okay. It's got to be applicable to a first, second, or third degree crime that they're charged on, or some other factors, okay. I'm not saying I'm against their suspension at the time, okay. I wouldn't have signed that suspension. I would have said, and that's something that would have got me fired in maybe 8.5 months. But I would not have signed a suspension order because, I know what the guidelines provide for. But when you have a guy like Jim Shea, who's all about the politics of it, Jim Shea should have, if you had, I don't know who his advisor was at the time, Shea, but if you had he's probably, I know Philip. Philip was probably yelling at him, we got to do this, we got to do that. And Jim Shea doesn't really have any respect for New Jersey law, and what controls our police departments. But whoever advised him of that was wrong, and the evidence of that is that all the officers were put back to duty. Now again, I don't like suspensions without pay. I'm not saying I wouldn't have signed that if the mayor ordered me to, because I take orders beyond, regardless of what other people might think, that I was resistant to taking orders. I was resistant to taking illegal orders, but I would have advised heavily against, suspending them without pay. Do I think it was a political indictment? I don't know. I don't know what evidence they have. I'm not going to, just cast every indictment that the prosecutor's office makes, on police officers as being a political indictment. I will tell you this, at 12:30 at night, I don't think when those cops were going to work that they put their pants on and they're saying, hey, let me shoot at a car and kick people in the head, the guy that's burning. I don't think that any one of the officers thought that they were trying to put the fire out on on an innocent driver. I think that they were. I think that they thought that they had a bad guy there, and they were trying to keep him down, despite the claims that they were trying to put a fire out. Whatever, and I could even see that. I could see somebody trying to stamp that down. Stamp out part of the fire. I don't think that was the primary thing. I think you could attribute that to a bad guy trying to get up. A bad guy being on fire might have a gun, but it's too sanitized for people to really understand that, because people are watching this. They're going to probably say, this guy's defending, what happened. I'm not defending it. I'm saying it's a possibility, okay? Because most people haven't been out there at 12:30 at night when there's a car chase 7 miles, which should have been called off, and I'm going to make that judgment, based on my experience in patrol. It should have been called off. But that doesn't make it a crime because it wasn't called off. Okay, that might make it maybe some additional training, maybe even some other type of disciplinary action. It was initially called off, but it was reinitiated. But I will say this, that officers have a right when they're out there working the streets. And again, this is the type of attitude that you get from me, because I see so many people that aren't out there at night. When my 35 years, a lot of the guys that are my detractors, they're sitting home sleeping. Okay, they're in bed. They're not out there working in the streets. Okay, and they're passing judgments on those of us who are and who did. Okay, so these police officers have this adrenaline going. Okay, they're on this car chase. Somebody might have said gun, and maybe there's no gun. I don't know, but they get there. It's not going to be sanitized. They see somebody trying to get up and they kick them. Because this is the guy that somebody said had a gun. All that officer needs to get, to show is that he had a reasonable belief that his safety was at risk, essentially. Not trying to be a lawyer, out lawyer. But, so, in use of force situations, you don't have to, it might not sound good or anything, you don't have to, use force against the bad guy. You can use force against the good guy as long as you reasonably believe he's the bad guy, and as it should be, because things break fast, and mistakes are made, and mistakes, well, they may be training mistakes, well, they may be mistakes, good faith mistakes. They're not crimes.